There we go. Good evening. Welcome to Mayfield Heights Committee of the Whole meeting on October 24th, 2022. We'll begin with roll call, please. Shanisha.
Mr. Balestrea.
Present.
Mr. DeJohn. Mr. Mano.
Here.
Mr. Monaco.
Here.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Here.
Mrs. Snyder. Mrs. Teresi.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I apologize for the delay. Council President Snyder is stuck in the 271 traffic, so unfortunately, we're a little ill-prepared for the meeting to begin at 6. But the Committee of the Whole meeting has been scheduled for this evening with the purpose of providing an update on the state of Mayfield City Schools. We have Dr. Barnes, our superintendent, and Scott Snyder, our finance director. Dr. Barnes?
Thank you. Can they see the screen? Okay,
Yes,
great.
you can see it.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, move the mic.
Mike, move the mic. I like it. Mayor DeSico, members of council, and staff, we thank you for this opportunity to spend some time with you tonight. We're not going to be long-winded. We know that you have business to get to, but we appreciate the opportunity to give you an update on the state of the schools. With me tonight is our esteemed treasurer, Scott Snyder. He will have a part in this presentation. We'll talk about some things that we're proud of, some recognitions and celebration. We'll do a look forward and talk about our strategic priorities. We'll give an update on some fiscal and operations doings, if you will, in the district. And then in the end, we will entertain any questions that you might have. So with that, we'll go ahead and begin. So just a quick overview. Many of you know this, but never wanting to take it for granted. The Mayfield City Schools have held a constant enrollment trend of about 4,000 students since 1980. Those numbers fluctuate throughout the schools. Certainly, we have about 150 more elementary students this year. So younger families are continuing to move into the Mayfield City Schools. They see us as a really, really good option to raise their families and for their kids to attend our schools. We also have, like to highlight, oh, there we go, a little bit delay, sorry. The district also oversees 2 consortium programs. XL Tech, which is a career tech consortium with member districts, and also CVEC, which is a workforce development consortium for students with disabilities. As you can see on your screen, we have a variety of programs for career tech that we offer, from medical technologies to media, health programs, medical assistancing, exercise science, et cetera. We're very, very proud of our career tech consortiums. We are the host, we are the managing and fiscal agents of these consortiums, and the majority of the programs are on our campuses. So our students don't have to travel very far to have a career experience as it relates to career tech ed. Also, a couple highlights. Mayfield High School has been recognized by U.S. News and World Report as one of the best high schools in the nation. Mayfield High School has also won the Great Schools 2022 College for Success Award, preparing students for college and beyond. And also to mention, just to kind of brag about the diverse course offerings and programmings that we have to meet the various diverse needs of our students. Mayfield High School offers 130 elective courses, 28 of those in advanced placement courses. So we really take it serious when we make an attempt to put programming together that provides a wide, diverse range of programs for our students to interact with. Also, niche.com, which is an independent ranking organization, ranked Mayfield High School an overall A. And as you can see the indicators there, academics, teachers, clubs and activities, sports, et cetera. I don't want to read all of that to you, but based on that criteria, Mayfield High School is ranked by this organization in the nation as one of the nation's best high schools, along with U.S. News and World Report. So we're very proud of Mayfield High School and those accomplishments. Also, Mayfield Middle School, some highlights. They exceeded state standards on all 3 of the state report card indicators that was released in September in achievement, progress, and gap closing. We also have 29 elective courses at our middle school as well, so we're excited about that. Like the high school, a diverse range of courses for our students to have access to and be able to take. Most local high schools don't have 29 elective courses, and we have 29 at our middle school. And also proud to share that Paul Destino, our middle school principal, was named the OMLA, the Ohio Middle Level Educator of the Year. So congratulations to Mr. Destino, and they'll keep up great work at Mayfield Middle School as well. Lander Elementary School, which is in your backyard as well, like the middle school, met or exceeded state standards on 2 of the 4 state report card indicators. Those are achievement and gap closing, and also making progress on the remaining 2 indicators of progress and early literacy. So we wanted to just highlight a few of those achievement indicators for council tonight. Also happy to welcome a new leadership team at Lander. Stephanie Cicerci is the Lander principal. She served the previous 4 years as the assistant principal at Millridge. She is a fantastic educational leader. Her and Nikki Rucci-Mikado, who is our new assistant principal at Lander, a homegrown girl. In fact, Nikki was a student when I first started teaching at Mayfield, so I've been around quite a while. They are just a dynamic team and have injected a great spirit of energy and enthusiasm in that building. So we're excited about that new team and what they're going to do at Lander. Just a look ahead this year, right now, we have entered into a 1-year strategic plan where we want to be focused on student achievement, growth, and engagement. Also, development of our professional learning communities, pre-K to 12, where our teachers get together and they talk about student progress and they adjust their strategies instructionally to meet the needs of students where they are at. We continue to focus on and practice good fiscal stewardship and effective and efficient operations. That's our 3rd focus. And community engagement, number 4. That's why we're here tonight. We've been at the other council meetings and coffee talks in the other 3 communities as well. We believe that community engagement with you, our stakeholders, and others in the community is very, very important for 2-way communication so that we can know how we're doing. We always want to continue to get better, and your feedback certainly is much appreciated. Lastly, before I turn it over to Mr. Snyder, finish my piece other than the Q&A at the end, we are just focusing on ensuring that every student is college, career, and life ready. We believe we have a robust curriculum and program that we offer our students pre-K to 12 on their journey throughout our school. So I'll be back up at the end to answer any questions specific to teaching and learning and achievement. Thank you. Mr. Snyder.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Before I begin, I'm going to set my timer to 5 minutes because those that know me in the audience know that I have a tendency to go long. So much like our public participation, for those that attend our meetings, I'm on the clock. As Dr. Barnes indicated, we have 4 strategic pillars. I'm going to talk about fiscal stewardship and operations, which is pillar 3. Effective and efficient operations could also be synonymous with that term. I think to begin, let's define what that means. The vision statement and measure is to create the infrastructure and efficient and effective operations that support the vision, which is teaching and learning, of the district through the reallocation and allocation of resources. How do we measure these things? You know, we clearly are in front of the voters every 3 to 5 years to ask for a tax increase. So we measure this by levy cycles. 2016 will have been our last request. And you'll hear later tonight, 2024 is our targeted calendar year. We'll be back in front of the voters to ask for additional resources, which will be an 8-year period. So we're very proud of that. Expenditure growth rate. We try to stay around that 2% threshold, but like many of us today, we're dealing with inflationary forces that are outside of our control. But I am pleased to report that over the last 3 years, we've been under 3% in our expenditure growth rate, and we're very excited about that. I'm going to skip down to return on academic investment because I'm going to talk about that in a moment. What does that mean? Obviously, investing in people, and we're largely a people organization, but how else can we get a larger return on that academic investment? I can talk about millage and tax rate of the 31 districts in Cuyahoga County. We're right at the midpoint, so we're about 16th in our overall tax rate. I know folks locally like to think of us as a very high taxing organization, but relative to our competitive market, I guess our market being Cuyahoga County, we're right in the middle. And then market share, we talk about that a lot internally. What does our market share look like? And I think it's important to note that our enrollment has not declined in spite of us being predominantly at build out. We still have demand for our program, and we are not an open enrollment district, meaning kids have to live and reside here to attend here. And we have a lot of folks constantly trying to get into the Mayfield City School District, which is a real testament, I think, to one of our market share and one of our strengths. The objectives, I'm just going to talk about what we've done, what we're very proud of, and talk about the objectives current, and at least look at last year. So to promote fiscal literacy to all stakeholders, many of you sitting there, develop a budgeting model that supports the strategic priorities, which we're doing internally. Obviously, deferring deficit spending is critically important. What that means is cash outflows exceeding cash inflows. When we begin deficit spending, you begin to create a hole. You want to stay ahead of that, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But our first deficit is projected to be next fiscal year. We are a July 1 to June 30th fiscal year. So that's the first year of that deficit, so we're going to try to do things to mitigate that. We're very excited about negotiating four-year successor contracts for all of our bargaining units. We're able to accomplish that over a 2-week time frame within our financial projections and working together with our bargaining teams. And then finally, and we're going to talk about this in a moment, the strategic use of our one-time cash reserves. We ended the year with a $56 million carryover for about a $73 million operating budget. It's quite significant, and we're able to achieve that by working hand in hand with our internal partners as well as trying to stretch the dollars as long as we could while still trying to achieve educational objectives. Obviously, as an accountant, I like to use a lot of numbers normally, but I've been told pictures tell a better story. So I'm going to talk about this in a moment, but I mentioned $56 million was the carryover last year. The green bar represents revenue, the red bar represents expenses. As you can clearly see, the red bar begins to outpace the green bar beginning in 23-24. That's when deficit spending begins. It continues to get larger out into the future because our revenue is restricted in growth unless we are a community that has a lot of new construction, which we have pockets of new construction, but we're essentially at build out. So we begin deficit spending, and if we did nothing and the assumptions held true, our first end of year deficit wouldn't be until 28-29. It's a long ways away, but oftentimes people that ignore the phenomenon of deficit spending and then have to ask the next levy at that point in time in which they are in a deficit, every dollar that would be generated would have to fill that void first and then keep up with inflation. So we want to stay ahead of that. I mentioned in this circle transferring $20 million to capital improvements fund, and I'm going to talk about what that looks like in a moment, but you can see the impact on those cash balances if we ask the school board, which we are recommending that they do. So back in 2004, roughly, the district had the Ohio Schools Facility Commission come out and assess all of its buildings. I believe the most current building was constructed during the Nixon administration, just to give you an idea of it, and it was at Mayfield High School. But at that point in time, they identified $65 million worth of capital improvements back in 2004. Now, obviously, inflation, that number would be much higher today. But since that time, and during our campaigns, we've invested $74.7 million into our facilities over time, more of a pay-as-you-go, assess infrastructure, assess safety and security, and clearly the third guiding principles program enhancements. What we're recommending to this school board is they take $20 million out of its cash reserves for these 4 key objectives at the moment. Whoops, I'm out of time, but I'm just going to finish quickly.
Take your time.
May I continue? I got to look out to the audience. May I continue? Thank you. Priority 1 is minor road alignment, which sits in front of Mayfield High School there on Wilson Mills. That's been a long-standing goal, I believe, primarily of Mayfield Village, also of ours to alleviate some of the traffic concerns. So we exchanged some properties, purchased a property. Now we own the parcels where minor road ends. So we're going to create a new main entrance, which I'll show a picture in a moment of what that's going to look like. We're also going to move the CVEC operation from its current location at Mayfield Middle School to try to alleviate some of the congestion on that campus and add an addition to the Innovation Center, which is the old Cuyahoga County Library in front of Mayfield High School. We believe that there's an opportunity to gain some synergies in those programs because they're secondary students, and both some other programs in that site are quite conducive to maybe some kind of cross-training among those classifications of students. Lander Elementary, we intend to invest significant dollars, internal renovations, no additions, but there's no elevator at that site. And we often struggle with kids who are in wheelchairs, kids who have physical disabilities going up and down. So we feel like it's time, this is 2022, to add that improvement and then realign the classroom so they make sense. So 5th grade can be with 5th grade, 4th grade can be with 4th grade, et cetera, et cetera. Same is true at Center Elementary. If you've been to that building, it's quite wonky. It's got a variety of elevation changes. It's got a variety of additions. And what we'd like to do is do an addition onto that building, adding 4 additional K classrooms and also adding an elevator and reorganizing that building so that the grade levels are more appropriately clustered together. you're going to see a picture, at least the exterior, of what the exterior of that's going to look like. So Minor Road alignment, this is a rendition. You can see where Minor Road currently ends there to the bottom left. There'll be a new main entrance. There's an out-only drive that sits to the east of the Innovation Center. That will be removed. We are going to maintain the existing main entrance for our police and fire services only, so that way, in case of an emergency, they can get in, get out. But otherwise, everything's going to get moved to the east and align with Minor. We think the traffic study that's been conducted by Mayfield Village will make that far more conducive to traffic flow and be a little bit more inviting into the campus. This is a really tough rendition of, this is what you would see from Wilson Mills Road. This is the new front of the old Cuyahoga County Public Library. If you look to the right and you see the lighter gray scale, that is the addition we're putting on the building. So it's actually going to come towards Wilson Mills. We're going to eliminate some of that driveway, and we're going to move CVEC to that location again to try to achieve some economies of scale and gain maybe some interesting new programming from that. Again, an addition onto the Cuyahoga County Library. This is Center School. This is really a tough one to kind of determine where this is, where's the addition. But if you look at the picture to the left, the current admin entrance, there's a set of doors, the admin office, and then adjacent to that are the 4 new kindergarten classrooms that we're going to add onto that building. And then you see a little, it's kind of like in a little addition coming out above that. That's where the elevator is going to go. Because of the way that building's laid out, that is the most conducive place to put it where it wouldn't interrupt a lot of the other flow improvements. And to the right is kind of a rendition of what these option spaces where a lot of kids can gather. Personalized learning is another theme that we're definitely implementing in the district. And the spaces should reflect that learning that we want kids to do. They shouldn't have to power down or go to Panera Bread to have the functional furnishing that they would otherwise in that kind of flexible space to learn, rather than rows and lines of desks, which many of us, I know, when we were in school, that's the way that instruction was delivered. It's a completely different world today. Lander Elementary, I'm sure the one that everybody wants to see here, again, it's going to have flexible spaces. You can see that we're going to attempt to create operable walls where possible, where we can join classrooms, have classrooms come together. We're going to repurpose a lot of the interior of that building. It's got really good bones, a really good flow. There's an interior courtyard that we like to do some really neat things with, so that it's actually usable and a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. We're going to rethink the media center, make it again more of a personalized learning space, maker spaces, places where kids can tinker. So we're really excited about these, and again, we're going to use our cash reserves to pay for these improvements. $20 million is the total estimate. However, that includes some contingency because we live in a world today where we've got supply chain disruptions, we've got inflation. We're hoping to hit if the board agrees, we're hoping to hit the market ahead of a lot of school construction, which typically occurs in bidding, I should say, which occurs in January and February to get ahead of the curve. So with that, I'm well over my time. I apologize to all, especially the board members who are sitting here because they're used to me doing this, and yield back to Dr. Barnes.
Don't leave. So, on Friday, that marks the end of our first grading period, and it also marks 100 days. When I transitioned into the district, as a part of that transition, we put together a 100-day transition plan. And so what we've continued to do in the spirit of that 100-day plan is every 100 days, we do a reset and assess of where we are as a district and how we're progressing towards our strategic priorities. As you see there, that's just a little visual. In order for us to continue to advance the ball down the court, if you will, for our students and impact student outcomes, we have to continue to progress monitor to see how well we're doing. And if not, then what adjustments we need to make in order to sustain the high quality of education that this community deserves and expects from us. So with that, we'll take any questions that council may have.
Does anyone have a question for Dr. Barnes? Mr. Balestrea.
Dr. Barnes, how does the school system ensure that our children are truly residents of the community? You know, we've heard, at least I've heard from numerous residents, they feel that a lot of the kids that attend our school systems don't belong here legally. They take residences of aunts or uncles or whoever, but their children go elsewhere after school hours. And I've heard that, you know, in previous administrations as well.
Sure. we, obviously, if return mail is a red flag, but we also have a staff member that we hire and contract with that actually is, I would say, our residency coordinator, if you will.
Okay.
He frequently makes drives around to see where kids are getting dropped off, where buses are stopping, and that activity, and he then investigates whether or not families or students are actually living in the district while they're attending our school. So that's kind of, we have an internal process where we contract services to keep a watchful eye on making sure that the students that are attending our schools actually live in the community.
That's good to know. Thanks.
Dr. Barnes, can you give us a brief explanation on the indicators of the state report card? You read a lot about that in the articles nowadays.
Sure, thank you for that. There's actually 6 indicators that make up the state report card, and actually they're quite informative, and they're great indicators of how we're doing, and we pay close attention to those. And a lot of our professional learning community meetings and conversations stem or are centered around the indicators on the report card. So there's 6, but not all 6 apply to all buildings, depending upon the level. If it's elementary, there's a certain set of indicators. If there's a high school, it's a certain set of indicators. And if it's the middle school, there's a certain set of indicators. But to answer your question, there's achievement, which measures the student's ability when they take the state test to demonstrate proficiency as it relates to the state standards. So that's achievement. Next is progress. Progress monitors a student's ability to demonstrate 1 year's growth from 1 year to the next. For example, when a student transitions from 4th grade to 5th grade, there's an expected progress of 1 year's growth from 4th to 5th. And that's a measurement that tells us how we're trending with respect to ensuring that our students are all making 1 year's growth. Then there's gap closing. Gap closing measures the achievement gap and how we're closing that gap of our subgroups, students with disabilities, your minority students, your students that are economically disadvantaged, students who speak English as a second language. So we are measured, or we are scored on how well we're closing the gap of students related to that subgroup in terms of achievement. Then there's early literacy, it's K to 3. How well are we moving students in reading, in literacy from one level to the next? So for example, if a student is not on grade level in K1 or 2, they're put on what they call a plan of assistance. And at the end of that year, we are measured as to whether or not we've moved that student on grade level. That's an indicator. I mean, early literacy is the basis and the foundation of all learning. So that's a very important indicator. And then there's graduation rates. There's a 4-year graduation rate and a 5-year graduation rate. The reason why there's a 5-year graduation rate is because students with disabilities have 5 years to graduate from high school. So what used to happen in the old report card system, when they used to just evaluate the graduation rate on 4 years, is it was wrongfully penalizing districts and students who needed that 5th year because of their disability to graduate from high school. And then there's college and career readiness. That indicator is not reported out on the report card yet. All intents and purpose for all intentions is that the college and career readiness will become reported out across the state for all districts starting next year in 23-24.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I have a question.
Mr. Monaco.
Doctor, in about 2 years or so, you would come to the voters and ask for additional income for the school. The first question that I have as a resident, as a voter, is there a need for additional funds? The second question, and most importantly to me, is what is the school system doing to cut costs? And, you know, it's not necessarily in laying off teachers or something, but there's a lot of things that I believe the school could do in collaboration with cities, or, you know, I'll give you for example, you know, you can buy salt, larger quantity if you do it with the school. You can buy gasoline, you know, at a discount if you do it with the cities or some. Have you thought of these programs, or have you contacted anybody to try to keep the costs down?
Great question. 80 cents of every dollar we spend is in people. We've been working very diligently over the last at least decade. We've been introducing things like exit incentives, where we've been trying to turn over our most senior folks, our most costly folks, with cheaper entry level. However, we don't want to lose sight of losing that critical mass of expertise. So there's always a fine line there. So that's a tool that we've used very strategically among all classifications of employees, whether it be teachers, classified staff, bus drivers, in order to make sure that we manage that. But pension reform has also impacted that, meaning people have to work longer to receive their pension. Healthcare is another big cost driver in our budget, where we have been working closely with our unions and been very specific and strategic in using things like we have an on-site wellness center in an effort to reduce the overall absenteeism, which is related to having a substitute come in. But also, how do we maybe get them to be more proactive in their own personal health care? I know you mentioned SALT. Absolutely, we participate in a number of co-ops. In fact, I think Dr. Nedlick is sitting in the back. It was dumb luck, but right now we locked in our electric, gas prices well in advance of this high spike, that I think it's a 3-year commitment, 5, where we took a risk thinking this is going to happen. So we've been using every tool at our disposal to make sure that the overall program is not negatively impacted, but we're trying to control the rate of growth. I think, as I mentioned, being under 3% in year-over-year growth, coming out of COVID, not knowing what the world is going to look like, not knowing what school is going to look like, every day we're about to embark on a fairly significant staffing discussion that starts now for next school year. So a lot of planning, but we look at everything, trying to gain synergies where we can, partnering with districts, partnering with our municipalities. Is there a way to share services? It's another option we can begin looking at. So I don't know if that specifically answers your question, but we are attempting to reduce our expenditure footprint. And with respect to the levy request, we wouldn't be in front of the voters if we didn't feel like we needed to be, especially in this time. As inflation is growing, we're not certain economically where we're at. In my time frame at Mayfield, the Great Recession began in 2008, began to subside a little bit in 2016. COVID then hit in 2020, disrupted the markets. Now we're looking at potentially hyperinflation. Could we see increase in delinquencies? I mean, I know I've emailed Karen and many of her colleagues about what's happening locally, economically, so that we can have a pretty good gauge of what's happening. And Progressive Insurance, let's face it, they're not back. They're not on site. I think Rockwell and Parker are currently not on site on campus. It has impact on your income tax collections. It does have an impact on our property tax collections. So we are all serving the same people. So trust me, we're keenly aware and laser focused on trying to stay off the bat as long as possible. And we will continue to be focused on that.
So, Mr. Snyder, how you say that you're going to use cash reserves to pay for the improvements. What are the advantages or disadvantages of using cash reserves versus borrowing the money?
Sure. That was an internal conversation we had, so I don't know how that. I'm kidding. I think the advantage of using cash reserves is typically 50% of every dollar you borrow. If it's stretched over a 30-year period, you're going to pay an interest cost. We have the cash now, and it can either be leveraged, and therefore half of those resources, because it's a fixed amount of money, or we can take these strategic reserves, pay cash. That's a 30-year return on that investment. It's one-time money that we're attaching to a one-time expense. That's what we've discussed internally. In addition to borrowing in the borrowing market, when we borrow money, it does impact the debt capacity for all of our communities. So we're very conscientious of what debt needs do you have, because there's a debt limit for Mayfield Heights of which we participate and we attach to that. But when you think of it in terms of inflation as well, the cost of purchasing the items, the cheapest point, if you think about time value of money, is to buy the item today, unless it's a commodity like fuel. But lumber may come down slightly, but it's not going to come down drastically to the point where it's going to be cheaper 20 years from now to construct something that's a capital improvement. So today, we're teed up, hopefully if the board approves, to get out on the market, firm up these commitments, and therefore we're deferring our risk to someone else. So we think it's the best financial approach today, given the market we're in. Hopefully that answers your question. That was a good one.
Thank you. Any, Mayor, do you have a question?
Yeah, Dr. Barnes, so you mentioned the gap indicator. How is the baseline set for that indicator?
Yeah, it's based off the achievement score, where it's really kind of complicated. What they've broken it down, the achievement component into like 6 categories. It's proficient, accomplished, advanced, and then accelerated advanced, and then below it's limited and basic. And based on that cut score around the proficient indicator, within the indicator, they determine where the gaps for students are that are not meeting up to the standard. And then they measure whether or not we're getting the gap smaller or not. And you get credited through the state report card for shrinking the gap over the course of a student's.
And that's school by school, or is
School
that
by
set?
school,
Yeah,
school by
gotcha.
school, and as an overall district.
Gotcha.
And we as a district, scored 5 out of 5 stars on that, which significantly exceeds state standards. So we're really proud of that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mano?
Thank you. I just want to piggyback on Mr. Balestrea's question, because I too, in my capacity as a councilman, have gotten inquiries from residents about the fact that the buses drop off a lot of kids, and there's always a lot of cars waiting to pick them up, especially in the apartment complexes. Now, you say you have a guy whose job is to investigate, you know, what's going on, if there's abnormalities and so on. Is there any way that we can get a number, an idea of how many of these things have come to fruition and students have been taken out of the system that didn't belong in it? I think that would ease a lot of people's minds about how many kids are going to our school that really don't belong in this district.
I can give a number. I'm going to just kind of add to what Dr. Barnes was saying earlier. A couple of years ago, all the registration occurred at the buildings. So if I was new to the district, or if I were changing my my residence, my permanent residence, it happened at that building, and then it was sent to central office. We switched that. So now all changes in residency occur in a central location, and the same standard is applied. So whether you're renting or selling, buying, documentation, whether it be a signed lease and a utility bill. So we are being very vigilant in making certain that kids are residents of the district. He mentioned that we do have somebody that's not on staff that we contract with, a former district employee who's very familiar with our different streets and et cetera. When we hear something, we follow up. We also have to be careful, though. Kids that are identified as homeless have a right to attend Mayfield if they have no address. That is a federal mandate. We also very delicately ask questions about whether they are homeless. So we are using every tool that we can to ensure that the kids that attend our district are here. Oftentimes what we hear is folks will call us because they see somebody dropped off at point A and being picked up by someone and leaving. We'll follow up on that. I will tell you there have been instances where folks have sold homes and still are using the former residence as their primary residence and then bringing their kids back. And when we catch them, of course, we address it at that point. There have been situations, and sometimes those conversations aren't necessarily the most pleasant, because I've at least heard them on the periphery. But that is something we take very seriously, because we hear from all of you the importance of living here, paying taxes, and we want the kids that reside in the district to attend the district. So I know that didn't give you a specific statistic, but hopefully it helped provide a little bit more context around our process. It's very rigid. So I don't know if you want to add anything, Dr. Barnes.
No, just to add to Scott's point, it's a very thorough process. I think it's been impactful when we move the registration to be more central versus out in the buildings. And when we find someone that is not living here, we withdraw them immediately, unless it's a situation where it's homeless and we have to go through that next iteration of the process.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Oh, Mr. Monaco?
I have a very serious question. Is this the year that Mayfield finally gets to play Hoban and possibly beat him?
We have to get through Fitch first.
I have a question. When do you believe you'll begin the renovation at middle school with the driveway and CVAC? I know I get a lot of parents that pick up, and grandparents that pick up their children, and they're, lane of traffic and pretty cranky about all of it. I know you're going to do something, but when is that going to begin?
Currently, the focus to get, turn that off, is to have CVEC move to the high school campus. So right now, based on the last projection that I've heard unofficially, that'll happen sometime during mid-year next year, is when we believe we'll have the construction completed. I'm going to look at Mr. Nedlick. I think that's still the target, like around December of 23.
Yeah, we hope to have a contract in front of the board by the end of this calendar year for consideration.
So that's contract. Construction, however, is going to be correct, but probably when that happens sometime during the 23-24 school year, and we remove that traffic flow, that also impacts the AM drop-off and the PM pickup, we would then like to rethink, what are we going to do with that building? And we do have some ideas about how we can improve that traffic flow, but it's going to require a little bit of right timing. So I'm guessing that it's a 24-25 determination, or that's when you'll likely see something happen.
Thank you. And I neglected to introduce Dr. Steve Nedlick, who's Assistant Superintendent. Dr. Nedlick, would you like to stand up so we can all see you? There you are. Thank you for coming as well. Mayor.
I do have one more question. Is the online academy going to remain down there in that building?
Yes. Not necessarily in that building. When it moves to the high school, it will be a part of the high school footprint. Again,
I think that's good,
Yeah.
because my son was there, and I think it would help to keep them together.
yeah, the hope is that it will create a community. Instead of CVEC over there, the high school over there, Career Tech Ed over there, Exotech, we want to create a community of 9-12 learners.
Right.
And we think they could benefit from some program alignment and some synergies, yes.
Thank you.
Anything else? Mr. Monaco? Nope. Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming forward. We appreciate hearing all about the best school system in the area, and we look forward to all of the wonderful things that you're going to do for our kids.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Teresi. Please state your name and speak into the microphone. And your address. There's no special treatment here.
Could you set your clock for 5 minutes, please? All right, Jimmy Teresi, 1580 Fruitland, school board member, along with Al, Ronnie. We are having an open house at the middle school on November the 12th from 11 to 2. We are also planning a 100-year birthday party, which we're not sure yet. We think it's 23. But right now, we're having an open house. I know that Don's wife went to the school. I know some of your children went to the school. And I think when you see what we have done with that school, you'll be amazed. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Teresi. Your 5 minutes are up. And I am. The 4 years that I was council president, I never allowed him to speak in the public portion. So,
You have to give him the gavel.
so he was very fortunate tonight. And again, we have school board member Al Hess, school board member Ron Finaro. Do we have anyone else? No. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate you coming. Thank you for having us. Thanks. Our pleasure. We will close the public portion. I'm sorry, we'll close the committee of the whole. Do we need a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Balistrea. Second by Mr. Monaco. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. We now are adjourned.
Good evening. I would like to welcome everyone to the October 24th council meeting of the City of Mayfield Heights. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Balestrea,
Present.
Mr. DeJohn, Mr. Mano,
Here.
Mr. Monaco.
Here.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Here.
Mrs. Snyder,
Here,
Mrs. Teresi.
Here.
please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This evening, I would like to welcome Carter and Parker. They're from the Boy Scouts. Can you boys please stand up? Oh, and Colin,
And Colin.
welcome to our council meeting this evening. Thank you for all that you do. Okay. Next is the approval of the minutes from our council committee of the whole meeting of October 10th. I hope everyone has had time to read these minutes over. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mr. Monaco. Are there any suggested changes, amendments, or deletions to those minutes? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? These minutes have been approved as written. Next, we will move to the minutes from the meeting of October 10th, council meeting. I hope everyone has had time to read these over. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea, second by Mrs. Tressi. Are there any changes to, or amendments or deletions to those minutes? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay? Opposed? Does any council member have any correspondence or announcements this evening? Mr. Monaco.
I would like to thank Mr. Balestria for meeting me in my neighborhood. We have some issues with the work that was completed, and he was gracious enough to meet me and go over, and we both shared our concern, and we will move forward to address it. So thank you, Mr. Balestria.
Mr. Balestrea.
I'll address that a little bit in my report, my Public Works report.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments from council? Seeing none, we'll move to reports of officers, starting with the mayor.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to start my report this evening by turning it over to the Cuyahoga County Office of Emergency Management, who's here this evening. We have David Wood and Mark Christie, who is here this evening to present Chief Elliott with a recertification plaque. This certification means the city has met the requirements and demonstrated we are ready to manage a major disaster or incident. So if you gentlemen would like to come up to the podium.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Christie, and I'm the County Emergency Manager for Cuyahoga County. So in that role, I lead the Office of Emergency Management. David Wood and I are very happy to be here tonight. David Wood is actually the Senior Emergency Management Specialist who works on the Ready Certified program, which is our community emergency certification program. And Mayfield Heights has now gone through the program twice, initially being accredited 5 years ago, now going through the recertification process this year. This program is not obligatory. It is a volunteer program that is based around a series of rigorous but attainable standards for planning, emergency response, exercising, and so forth. These standards are based on national best practices, lessons learned across the country. So Mayfield Heights really does set themselves apart from other communities and organizations by taking the time and effort to going through this process, and it really is worthy of acknowledgement. Our county emergency management office, we're always trying to focus our attention on making sure that all the different assets, communities, moving parts in our county can be able to work together during large-scale emergencies. So this program is one of those ways we try to accomplish that. And so I just really want to thank Mayfield Heights, and in particular Chief Elliott, for having the time and dedication to go through our program yet again. And again, just we are here to congratulate Mayfield Heights on a job well done and again, satisfying the requirements of this program. So, just going to read this plaque real quickly. In recognition of Mayfield Heights' enduring commitment to emergency preparedness and the safety and well-being of its citizens, it is with great honor that Mayfield Heights is declared recertified in Cuyahoga County's Ready Certify Emergency Management Certification Program. So again, congratulations to you all, and Chief Elliott.
I really just want to take a minute to thank Mark and David. I've been working with these guys for many years now, and the Office of Emergency Management has done a wonderful job preparing the communities in Cuyahoga County for anything. They work with us on a pretty regular basis. I know each and every member in the office by name. I could always get in touch with them. They have outstanding programs such as this. I just know if we had tragic emergency here in Mayfield Heights, that I could just pick up the phone and I would be able to get resources and assistance. They would help with FEMA, with reimbursements. So I really do want to thank Mark and his team for all the work and everything that they do for the safety and the welfare of Cuyahoga County. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
It's really not surprising that not only did our fire department become recertified, but it's not surprising that you go above and beyond to make sure that, we have the highest standards. So thanks, Chief. Appreciate that. Another new business opened its doors in Mayfield Heights. Frankel Dentistry opened on October 13th in the Monarch Building, which is 5885 Landerbrook. And another reminder that the service department is gearing up for fall leaf pickup. Remember to rake your leaves to the curb, not into the street, to the tree lawn. They're also gearing up for winter season, inspecting all their vehicles and to make certain that they're all up to our standards and are ready when the snow flies. I know we don't want to think about that, but unfortunately we have to. You can keep up to date with the new Aquatic and Community Center project. Visit the city's website under Community News to follow the progress. And it really has a lot of information there. I think you'd be pleasantly surprised at what you see there. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any questions for the mayor? Moving to Law Director, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do have a few items to report. First of all of council received a copy of resolution number 2022-80, awarding a contract to Smith & Obie for the City Hall HVAC system, and the mayor sent a memo on that, and that should be added to the agenda if council is so of a mind. Secondly, there were a couple of typos in the 3 Board of Zoning Appeal resolutions, which have been corrected, so the correct number will be signed if they are passed. And then thirdly, in ordinance number, let's see, where is it? 2022-26, titled Permit and Fees. I spoke to Mr. Monaco today, I spoke to Mr. Thomas today, and there is some tinkering that needs to be done with that ordinance, so I would request that that just be placed on first reading this evening. That's 2022-26. But since that creates a problem for Mr. Thomas, since he has to create his forms for 2023, I would ask council to look at, to lock in the fees for ordinance 1335.04 pertaining to the ABR, 1335.06 point of sale fee, and 1341 housing license fee. If anybody has any problem with those, let me know. Otherwise, I'll assume that they'll be okay when we finally adopt the legislation, and so inform Mr. Thomas. And finally, I would like to have an executive session at the end of this public business in order to discuss economic development. And that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Are there any questions for the Law Director? Director of Finance, Mrs. Fagan.
Thank you. I have no formal report tonight. Ordinance 2022-24 is on the agenda, which is the next amendment to our appropriations ordinance. When that comes up, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Thank you. Any questions for Mrs. Fagan? Next on our agenda are reports of committees, commissions, and boards. If your committee or board has met, please, this will be the time for you to give your report. Building Committee, Mr. Monaco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the agenda this evening, we have ordinance number 22-25, enacting Chapter 719 of the Codified Ordinance of Mayfield Heights. The ordinance pertains to donation drop boxes and is needed to regulate location, number, maintenance, frequency of collection, sanitary condition, and the time frame restriction of those units. We also have ordinance number 2226 that pertains to permit fees. Our fees have been very low, and this ordinance will bring them up to par with surrounding communities. I would recommend placing this on first reading, and more discussion is needed to take place. Mainly, the biggest concern that I have is the calculation of the fees. In my opinion, the fees should be based on square footage of the project rather than a valuation. But, we will discuss this at a future meeting. We also have ordinance number 22-27. This is regarding vacant properties. The purpose of this ordinance is to identify and register vacant residential and commercial properties within the city. The owners of such properties have 30 days to register the property after it becomes vacant. If the owner doesn't reside in Ohio, he must designate a manager in charge of the building who resides in Ohio. So the building commissioner is present, and he will answer any question that we may have. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Monaco. Are there any questions at this time for Mr. Monaco? Finance and Audit Committee, Mr. DeJohn is not here this evening, so our member is Mr. Balestrea.
The Finance Committee did not meet, but I understand the budgets are in process, and we will probably be scheduling a meeting very soon.
Thank you, Mr. Balestrea. Legislative Committee, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. I do not have a report.
I just have one quick question. Were you able to get the meeting together for the solar panels yet?
We are working on it, as to also the chiefs have asked me for a few pieces of legislation.
Okay,
So Bob and I are trying to put together a date.
okay, thank you.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Balestrea.
I had some legislation drawn up last year changing the restrictions on sheds. And it seems this is probably an opportune time to now submit it to committee. It seems the requests have started again. I know we have had a couple BZA issues with variances for shed sizes, and it's on the agenda tonight. And it's also in the minutes for the BZA that it seems that they've requested to have some new legislation drawn up. So I've already had that drawn up with the assistance of Mr. Murphy. And now I would like to submit that either to building and or legislation for review. So maybe we wouldn't have so many requests coming into the BZA for shed sizes.
Okay. So Mr. Monaco and Mrs. Sabetta, if you would like to, if you want to do a joint meeting, or Mr. Monaco, a building meeting,
Absolutely,
organize that.
whichever you prefer. I'd like a building meeting to discuss it, and then if it needs to go to legislative meeting, then we can also have that afterwards. But I think
Perfect.
it should start with the building committee.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Balestrea. Public Works and Service, Mr. Balestrea.
No, no meeting officially, but I do have a report. The committee would most likely meet after the budget meeting to determine what funds are going to be available for our 2023 road program and sidewalk programs. I hope to double the number of sidewalks done in 2023, since none were done additionally in 2022. Also, I spoke with our city engineer regarding the poor workmanship in the Marshfield and Longwood project. The asphalt pour was inconsistent. Some curbs are now non-existent. Some of the aprons are above the grade of the asphalt. Water was pooling on the streets. I went over with Mr. Monaco actually during some rainy time, and there was a catch basin sitting right there, and the water wasn't even flowing into the catch basin. It was just pooling out in front. So I'm not an engineer, but just visually looking at the streets, I felt it was poor workmanship. I had a number of residents call, as well as Mr. Monaco did. I requested from the finance director that we would hold final payment until the city engineer signs off and can issue a final report. I know he's right now he's compounding a punch list of all the discrepancies with the job, and they won't get paid until the city is satisfied with the workmanship. So, not a good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs.
Madam Chair, if I could just
Mayor.
interrupt. The city engineer did send me he couldn't be here this evening, still trying to work out his schedule with our schedule, but he's going to get that worked out. He did send me a email with regard to the ongoing road program, and he said, they are aware that ponding water, curb height, and drive approaches. We're meeting with the contractor early next week to discuss resolution of the pending items.
Thank you.
Can you keep us updated on that? No? Okay, that's okay.
Yes, I will.
Thank you. Mr. Monaco.
She has a question first, I think.
Oh, Mrs. Tracy.
Thank you. I just was going to ask Mr. Balestrea, we do have the $200,000 in the fund from this year, since we didn't do any sidewalks, and next year we'll just add to that.
That's what I hope to do, yes.
Thanks.
Okay. Perfect.
We hope to go out on bid,
Yep.
we hope to go out on bid early,
Yes.
so then we could find somebody that could do a larger job and get them tied in to the project, early on. So that's why, as soon as we know what the budget is, we'll meet and try to finalize some finances and go out on bid as soon as possible, definitely before the end of the year.
Perfect. Thank you.
Madam Chair, yeah, the
Mayor.
thought is maybe do an early and a later one. So do basically double the sidewalk program next year.
That's good.
Mr. Monaco.
I have a couple questions. The first one is, do we know if this project came on budget, under or over budget? And the second question is, how much of the amount that we owe them is being paid already?
I can address part of that anyhow. I don't have the exact breakdown of what has been paid to them and what we still owe them. I will get that to you first thing in the morning. But we would not do any payment to any vendor on any subject unless the proper department head has signed off and okayed it. So certainly until we get a sign off from the engineer, that will not be paid.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Moving to Recreation and Parks, Mr. Mano.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We had the Halloween party this past Friday evening, and of all the years I've been doing this, I think that was the best weather we have ever had for Halloween. It was well attended. Everybody had a great time. Thanks to the service department and all the other people that helped and volunteered. Mayor, thank you for your assistance. You were there from the beginning to the end. And I think everybody had a really good time. and the weather was perfect. You couldn't have asked for better. And that's my report. Oh, and there's a Park and Rec meeting tomorrow night in these chambers.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Mano? Safety and Transportation, Mrs. Teresi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The committee has not met, therefore I have no report.
Thank you. Board of Zoning Appeals, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. The Board of Zoning and Appeals met on October 11th. There are several items on tonight's agenda. Council does have the meeting minutes. I encourage all applicants to address council during the public portion of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. In Planning Commission, Mr. Balistreo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a report this evening. My Planning Commission did not meet.
Thank you. We will now move to comments from the public. Pursuant to City Code, each person will be allotted 5 minutes to speak, with a maximum of 30 minutes for the entire public portion. If you are here in connection with an agenda item, this is your opportunity to address council. However, please note that this is not an opportunity for debate or slighted comments. If you would like to be heard this evening and have not done so already, please fill out a form at the back table and bring it up to the council dais. During the public portion, I will call each person wishing to speak to the podium. Please state your name and address for the record and speak clearly into the microphone. It is 7:23. I open up the public portion. First, I will call up Deborah Kramer.
Hi, my name is Deborah Kramer. I live at 1110 Belrose Road. I'm back because I am requesting that this group enact legislation to allow solar panels on rooftops on front and side of the house. I would like to reiterate that my contractor had said he would help advise the city. His name is Aaron Godwin from the Renaissance Group. He had said that 2.5 years ago, and I'm assuming that offer still stands. So I'm waiting for a phone call. It was also suggested to me that I gather up some information in writing. I only got that information, that request, like a couple hours ago. But that if I gathered up some information, it might be helpful to the committee. So I will do whatever necessary to move this process along. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to be heard this evening?
Good evening, how are you? Good evening, my name is Carolina Denuncio, 31791 Cedar Road. And I'm here for the same problem that we had before about the fence. The last 2 weeks, all I've been doing is checking fence all around the city, the same type of fence that we have it. I went to your house, Mr. Balestria. You pulled a permit in 2016 for a garden fence, and you have a 6-foot panel on your left side of your house. No permit bullets. I hope Mr. Thompson does something about it. I went to the city to pull permits for everybody and look it up, public record. I see Mr. DeSico has 2 fences in his house, not allowed according in the city of Mayfield Heights. One is chain, the other one is 6-foot panels. The neighbors told me that you just put it 2 weeks ago. You never pull a permit. All the fence that I was checking around, vinyl like my fence, are all over 6 feet. This is an harassment. This is discrimination. And then that's all I want to say tonight. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to say I'm well aware.
State your name.
My name is Braden Thomas. I'm the Director of Building.
Thank you.
I'm well aware of the mayor's fence going up. I've had a conversation with a few council members that recently had work at their house. The building department is attempting to implement a new software portal that allows residents to go online and fill out their applications and pay for it online. I was attempting to test it out with a couple trusted sources. So that's all I have to say about that. Any questions?
Are there any questions from council? Okay. Thank
Madam
you.
Chair?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Balestra.
The fence that you spoke of is not mine, just for the record, and I do have a permit for the other.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to be heard this evening? Mr. Ward.
Thank you. The first comment I want to make is Resolution 2022-72 for the interior furniture that we discussed at the last council meeting. I was attempting to get samples for everyone to check out, and I'm still waiting on the main sample that was requested, so we'll have to put this on second reading and readdress it again at the third council meeting, so. And then what I gave you is a rendering of the layout of the shade structures for the pool deck. Just wanted to share that with you. That's on the agenda tonight, Resolution 2022-75. The cost for that will be $77,000. However, if we make the purchase before the 31st of October, we can save $2,600. You'll see on the left, or on the right, I'm sorry, the legend for the different, we have 2 triangular shade structures. We'll have 4 umbrella type structures and 4 various size rectangular structures. And the colors are signified down below. So the umbrellas will be that pretty dandelion color. The triangle umbrellas close to the pool entry will be the tree frog color. And the 4 rectangular umbrellas will be the sky blue color. So.
Okay, we can address it when we come up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to be heard this evening? Okay, it's 7:30. Now we'll close the public portion. We will move to resolution number 2022-72. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2022-72, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Ohio Desk for the purchase of interior office furniture for use in the Mayfield Heights Community Center and declaring an emergency. Contract number 800876, second reading. And as Mr. Ward said, it should be placed on second reading.
Okay. We'll then move to resolution number 2022-74. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2022-74, a resolution reversing the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in recommending a variance be granted to Damian Denuzio and Carolina Denuzio, 31791 Cedar Road, to erect a fence over 6 feet in height, Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 863-28-01. First reading.
Is there,
I'm sorry, and determining to deny the variance requested and declaring an emergency. First reading.
is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano. Second by Mr. Monaco. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Balestria.
Second.
Second by Mr. Monaco. This resolution solidifies the council's disagreement with the BZA in granting the variance in which they do not believe there is an established practical difficulty. The vote by council was taken at the September 13, 2022 meeting with a vote of 6-1 not in favor of the variance. This time, does any council member have any questions or comments?
Yeah, just to clarify, if council agrees that the BZA was in error and that the variance should be denied, then the vote would be yes to adopt this resolution.
I guess I do have one question for Mr. Thomas or the law director. This not the actual variance that they were requesting, would that mean that the whole fence would have to come down, or is it just the west side?
It's just whatever, it's just whatever doesn't comply with city ordinances. So it's 6 feet is the required or the allowed height, so it can be 6 feet or less.
Okay. Are there any further questions or comments? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
No.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. The resolution has been adopted. Resolution number 2022-75, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2022-75, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Game Time for the purchase of shade structures for use at the Mayfield Heights Aquatic Center and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Tressi, second by Mrs. Sabetta. All members of council should have received a copy and invoice from Game Time to provide the necessary shade structures for the new aquatic center. The total cost of these structures is $79,106. If the approval of this resolution and purchase goes through before October 28th, we will be given a discount of $2,081.58, which brings the total cost down to $77,094.42. Are there any questions for council?
I have a question.
Mr. Monaco.
When do we have to take delivery of these products? And if we do, where are we going to start it at?
Mr. Ward.
Well, there's, it will come sometime in the spring, and we will store it at our current pool location. We have some indoor storage that we can store that at. But the critical point is that we need to get the engineering drawings for the load bearing for the foundations. That's critical, and that's something that they don't release until 6 weeks after purchase has been made. So that's the critical piece of information that the Higley needs to move forward on foundations at the pool.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions for Mr. Ward? Thank you. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this resolution has been adopted. Moving to resolution number 2022-76, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2022-76, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with DWA Recreation for the purchase of funbrellas for use in the Mayfield Heights Aquatic Center and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea, second by Mr. Monaco. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mr. Monaco. All members of council should have received an invoice from DWA Recreation for the purchase of a 20-foot funbrella for the Aquatic Center. The total cost of this is $24,352. The proposed purchase is less than $25,000, therefore can be authorized by the mayor. Are there any questions from council? Okay, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Resolution 2022-76 has been approved. Moving to resolution number 2022-77, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2022-77, a resolution confirming the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in granting to Heather S. English, Apex Pinnacle Services, on behalf of Ross Dress for Less and H.H. Golden Gate LLC, 1565 Golden Gate Plaza, a variance to install 180 square feet of W1 signage on the front wall of the building. Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 862-30-001. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea, second by Mrs. Tressi. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Ross Dress for Less is coming to the city for a signing variance. The request of the variance is to add the words "dress for less," which is their tagline. All members of council should have received the minutes from the BZA. This was a 4-0 vote in granting this variance. Mrs. Sabetta, would you like to add to this?
Sure. The applicant states that Dress for Less is part of their corporate name, wanting to keep it uniform and easy for customers to recognize. It is used as part of their signature across the country. There's plenty of room on the facade, and the building director states the sign will also go to ABR. The practical difficulty is in the use of the property.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mrs. Sabetta? All right, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Monaco?
Nope.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. This resolution has been approved. Resolution number 2022-78, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2022-78, a resolution confirming the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in granting to Jill Stewart, 1125 Elmwood Road, a variance to construct a new storage shed on the property. Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 861-12-05, larger in area than that allowed by the codified ordinances. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea, second by Mrs. Sabetta. This resolution pertains to a variance request for a new storage shed to be built at 1125 Elmwood. The BZA approved the storage shed 4-0 in favor of granting the variance for the shed. And I will refer this to Mrs. Sabetta for further comment.
The applicant states that she bought the house about 2 years ago. It is a small house and a one-car garage. She has a large front yard and a large backyard. She has a large back patio and a fire pit with furniture. Her daughter has a landscaping business with 3 types of mowers. Recently, she removed a pool, and the foundation can hold the 200-square-foot shed requested. She would like to store her furniture and landscape equipment and free up her garage for her car. Yes, it was a unanimous decision, and the practical difficulty is in the use of the property. She states that having a pool that size, she could use a shed that size.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions? Mr.
Am I hearing this correctly, that she's running a landscaping business out of this residence?
No, her daughter has a landscaping.
So this is the reason why they're requesting a larger shed, because they have a landscaping business?
And she has a large patio and a fire pit in her backyard where I asked, she has no attic storage, and her basement is finished. It's a very small house.
Mr. Thomas?
Her daughter's 16 years old. It's just a part-time thing. This isn't a commercial enterprise that's being operated. So just a little information.
She also has a one-car garage, is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Tressi?
Is the pool already down?
Yes. That was my question. Also, the way her garage is, her side door entrance comes out. She did look into getting a two-car garage, but it would be an astronomical amount of money, where all she really needs is more storage.
Thank you. Any further questions? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Balestrea,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. Monaco,
Nope.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Resolution 2022-78 has been approved. Moving to resolution number 2022-79, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2022-79, a resolution confirming the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in granting to Robert Clark and Margaret Clark, 1620 Parker Drive, a variance to construct a new storage shed on the property, Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 862-32-013, larger in area than that allowed by the codified ordinances. First reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mrs. Sabetta.
Second.
Second by Mr. Balestrea. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Monaco,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mr. Balestrea. This proposal request is an 80-square-foot variance to build a 200-square-foot shed in the rear yard on Parker Drive. This was also granted by the BZA to a 4-0 vote. Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you. The applicant states that he has equipment that he can't store in a garage. He has a front-end loader, a tractor, and a zero-turn mower, currently stored in his backyard. He has a two-car garage, and they have 2 cars in it. The applicant is a design engineer, and this is in the minutes, but I would like to read it since Mr. Kramer, the chair, acknowledged what a great job it was and why we need these sheds looked at. He went to the Cuyahoga County site and averaged the plots in the area, and for a 200-square-foot shed, which he is requesting, it would be 2.5% of his property. His property is only 2%. Large back lot, the shed would be 15 feet from one property line and 5 feet from the Drake property line. Practical difficulty is in the use of the property. He has a large backyard.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments? Thank you. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco,
Nope.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, Resolution 2022-79 has been approved. This time, I would like to request a motion to add Resolution 2022-80 to tonight's agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta. Second
Second.
by Mrs. Tressi. Roll call on the motion to add to tonight's agenda.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Resolution number 2022-80 has been added. And Mr. Murphy, would you like to read?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2022-80, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Smith & Obie Service Company to provide a system of preventive maintenance for the HVAC equipment at the City Hall complex for a one-year period and declaring an emergency. Actually, it's a 3-year period, I'm sorry. For a 3-year period and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano,
Second.
second by Mr. Balestria. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mr. Balestria. So we received an email today from the mayor, and also the legislation is in front of us. I'm going to defer this to Mr. Brunello. Mr. Brunello, if you'd like to come up and just talk a little bit about what's in front of us this evening.
Good evening, all. So what we have at City Hall is a pretty complex system here with the HVAC. As you can tell, it's a little bit warmer here this evening. As I walked in, I noticed it right away. Long story short, we've had a contract with Gardner from 2017 until 2020, and then every year after that, we've been in a one-year deal with them all the way through. The past year or so, we've experienced some difficulty with some areas of the building here and some inefficiencies with how things were heating and cooling. So we did reach out to a consultant, an HVAC consultant, who came out and looked at the property and all the system, and he recommended that we bring Smith & Obie in for a trial run. They did a walkthrough, and they were able to accommodate us. Their price was reasonable compared to what Gardner was the last couple of years. Actually, they were a little bit less. And they've already identified multiple areas of the building that need to get repaired and have made it aware that it needs to happen somewhat soon, so.
Thank you. Correct, I'm sorry, Mayor.
No, Chuck, it's fine. And I'm not sure, it may be a one-year deal regarding, does it say 3 years?
It says 3 years.
It does, okay.
But I don't have the
The
contract.
proposal says 3 years.
And it could be, I didn't, that's 3.
So it's 20,500 per year. For 3 years. Coverage shall continue for 3 years.
That gives them the ability, they can remote in from their warehouse as well, or their facility to see what's going on here, just like Gardner was able to do the same. So,
Okay.
pretty reputable company as well.
So are there any questions for,
Madam Chair, if I could just jump in real quick. We've already noticed a couple improvements that they've done already. Mrs. Fagan will attest to that.
Literally, for the last several weeks, my entire staff has been working in gloves. I had one with a hat on. We all have lap blankets. We look like little old ladies working up there because we have blankets on our laps and the whole bit. So the fact that we actually had heat up there was an amazing accomplishment in and of itself, and that it was comfortable again. And we all know we can be much more efficient if we're working in a comfortable work environment.
Mrs. Tressi?
So if we knew that Gardner wasn't doing their job, why did we keep them for 3 years or until now? Why, I know we were supposed to get some sort of incentive back, and we did get money back, but they didn't fix the problems. Is that how it worked?
We didn't know there was as many problems that there was. They said this system here at City Hall is beyond complex. And every time they would come out, something new would occur, and that we didn't know there was, at least I didn't know there was this many issues until another company come out to actually identify what wasn't taking place, so.
I would be more comfortable if it was a one-year proposal instead of 3 years, because we could be in the same situation again.
Typically, we revisit these every year at the anniversary date. So, whatever you guys are comfortable with is fine with us, but.
Mrs. Fagan, what was the, what were we paying Gardner?
I don't have that in total in front of me. I was just trying to look it up, but I did notice in the maintenance agreement plan that there is the right to cancel it if within 30 days of the anniversary date. So if we were unhappy, we could absolutely do that.
Gardner's numbers I have in front of me, they were roughly 21,541. And that was a combined for the intelligence agreement as well as the preventative maintenance, which was a level 1 maintenance. That was the past year, and I believe that was a proposal again for this year moving forward.
And what is the anniversary date typically?
April.
April?
April 1. So we've been limping
So
through.
when we sign this, that will be our new anniversary date? Okay.
Well, when we sign, yeah, or could start from the now, typically. I mean, I think what you guys have said September 1st. August, yeah. It goes back a little bit, but it can be signed as soon as it's approved, yeah.
Okay.
It is maintenance as well, yeah.
And it is September 1 according to the agreement. It's the.
So September 1st.
The third page of your memo, that the first payment is due on the day coverage begins, and that is September 1 of 2022.
Okay. So we would need to revisit this in June, because we usually break for the summer months. So this might be something we need to look at the end of June to see how they've performed over the course of this year.
Sure.
It'll give us enough time to make a decision. Okay. Is there a question?
I knew it was bad from the day they put it in.
Mr. Monaco, did you have a question?
Yes.
Okay.
But the first question that I have is, why an emergency? I mean, we got this thing literally 2 hours ago, and, we expect us to study all this and come up with a intelligent, resolution to this. First of all, what are we getting for the $20,500? I'm reading here on repair and replacement, the contractor will bill separate for labor, travel, expenses, repair to worn and failed parts and stuff. So he's charging for everything. He's charging extra for emergency calls. I'm dealing with this company in another community, and they're not very happy with them. Did you get 2 or 3 quotes from other companies? How did you come up with this?
We have Gardner's quote in front of us. Well, I guess you guys don't have that in front, but I received numbers from Gardner. They were the same as they were last year. And most small company or any company would turn this system down. Actually, I called 3 others, and the 3 wanted nothing to do with it.
Who did you call, may I ask?
Heckman Heating and Cooling was one. All Comfort was another who does some of our work in the other departments. And there was another one. It'll come to me, but there was 4 for sure.
As I stated, they're in the community that I'm involved right now, and they're not very happy with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be the same for Gardner leaving here. We were a community, we weren't happy with Gardner, so kind of the same idea. My suggestion would be moving forward as far as the emergency part goes, because every time we call anybody out now, it's à la carte. We've been doing à la carte since April. We've been pretty lucky that we haven't had to have them out as much as we still have been calling Gardner in the meantime. And Karen can attest, the numbers grow very quickly, and even under, contract, not everything's covered, unfortunately, with any of these providers, so.
So what exactly are we getting for the $20,500? I mean, what kind of service are they going to provide us?
I don't know offhand, but it should be within the agreement that you guys have in front of you. It was pretty long agreement.
There's a bunch of things that, you know, they're checking this, they're checking that, but usually none of that stuff goes wrong.
Well, it depends who you ask. If you ask them, a lot of it is wrong right now. Again, just based on we walked through every bit of this system for 2 straight days and identified a whole lot of things that were, like I said, inefficient and not working properly. So the biggest part of the maintenance is spring and summer. They come out, they do cleaning checks of our furnaces, AC units, change all filters to make sure everything's running properly for the start of the seasons, which adds up quite a bit just because of how many systems we have here at City Hall.
The biggest problem that I see with that installation is the clearance around it. I remember that I was here when they installed that, and the footprints of the building at that time was too large, and they had to shrink it. And the part that was shrunk was the mechanical room. So the mechanical room did not have the clearance around all those equipment. So the equipment may be too close together, and they may not function properly because of that. I thought at that time they should have introduced some air into the space with some ventilation so that, you know, the equipment could be kept cooler or hotter in the summer or winter. So I don't know if that's done or not, but I think that's something that probably should be looked at first.
It could definitely be looked at. I know there's been significant improvements over the last 5 years for sure. Again, it's just the amount of work that has to take place is based on what they already did. There was a lot of work that was already done, but I'm not sure if they tackled any of the area with open space or condensed or made larger. I'm not sure about all that.
Madam Chair?
Mayor?
Yeah, the agreement does, it has Schedule A, B, and C. A describes the level of service. B is the limit of liability in terms and conditions, and C is the equipment. So if you look at Schedule A, Mr. Monaco was asking, what does it cover? Explains everything that it covers there. Of course, replacement and repair is not covered in there. That would never be covered in any kind of agreement like this. They can never guarantee what would need to be replaced or the cost of it. So it is all in here. And if you look at Schedule C and Schedule D, it does have a inventory of all of our systems. And it goes over everything that all those systems, or all those pieces of equipment, I should say, tasks required. And they did go through all of our whole system and came up with a name for each part and a task required, what its function is and a task required to maintain it. So it is all right there, if you take a look at it.
Mrs. Tracy?
What is, excuse me, what is the labor cost, since labor is additional? Hourly?
Yeah, offhand, I don't know. They gave us a breakdown of that. I requested that just because, like I said, we've been pretty much going a la carte for the past, 5-6 months. So they did provide that to me. I just don't know it offhand. I have it. If I can send it out if need be.
Yeah, there's labor, travel, and expenses to repair or replace. So I'd like to know what they're going to charge for the
Yeah, that's not a problem. They said it was.
And is it a minimum, like a 4-hour minimum if they come out and they work an hour? We're still paying for 4 hours?
I don't believe there was any minimums that I'm pretty sure of. But yeah, I can send you those costs once I get to my computer in the morning.
So have we hired them? Have they done some work here then?
They have. When we had them out to look at, they were really surprised at what they saw. And then, a couple of weeks, a month went by and things got warm. We had to call them back out and they continued to identify issues. And we said, well, while you're here, we're not under any contracts from anyone. Let's see if we can try to take care of some of these. And they did. And as Ms. Fagan said, they did identify a couple of those. They identified another one in the mayor's office and that entire wing, which apparently is a big problem. And it's a pretty big expense. So they have not moved forward with that project yet, though.
Mrs. Fagan, did they charge us an emergency fee or just à la carte, or you said à la carte?
Yeah, it was like, there was no emergency call-out for that.
Okay. Thank you. Mrs. Tressi?
So, Mr. Brunello, they're already assuming they have the job or the contract?
No.
No.
No, like I said, because Gardner's been out here a couple of times as well, in the meantime, if Smith and Obie it wasn't available, we called Gardner. Whoever can get here, pretty much the quickest to handle the problem.
Mrs. Fagan, how much have we paid for this work?
From Smith and Obie, we haven't paid them anything at this point in time.
No, but I mean between, Smith and Obie hasn't received
I
anything.
don't have a
How about
total,
Gardner?
I can get you a total, I don't have a total in front of me right now.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions from council? Mr. Monaco?
Again, I'd just like to get a little more time to look at those things. Just bringing it here at 6 o'clock tonight for us to take a look at it, I don't think it's fair to us. But, so I'm not going to vote for it just because of that reason.
Yeah.
I need to look at it better. I need more time.
Sure, no problem.
Madam Chair, I would just say that time is money. We're spending a lot of money calling out à la carte for this. So the more time we take, the more expensive it is, and I would trust the service department, Chuck and Tony, and their opinion on what needs to get done. So that's all I.
I guess my concern right now, too, is that we're kind of late in the season with winter coming, so,
I don't know what you're talking about.
I know, right? Yeah, we canceled it, I hope. All right, so, Mrs. Tressi? did you
Why
have another?
did we wait until, right before that season? If we knew, 6 months ago, we were having these issues, or why didn't we start bringing in different companies then?
Well, it goes back to, I said, was it August? And then council was on recess for the summer, and like I said, the weather cooperated, and we really didn't have many issues because everybody was comfortable. When uncomfort starts to occur, everyone kind of gets a little antsy, and here we are.
Mrs. Fagan, he's talking about you.
No, that's not true. She's not alone.
She's not alone.
She's not alone.
It was really
I
quite
will say
warm when we walked in here
It
tonight.
is warm in here today, and I think that's an issue too, where we have played with these thermostats for so long, and they haven't been as responsive, and I think they are a little more responsive now. And the Smith and Obie rep that was out last week was telling us things in the department that we weren't aware of, and how to address that. So that's going to be helpful moving forward. But they were also surprised that as cold as it was in finance, and they checked everywhere else in City Hall, that the rest of City Hall was just as cold. And I kind of liken it to, you're in a bad relationship and you just deal with the abuse, the bad things. And no one was complaining, and they couldn't believe no one was complaining because it was that bad, because we had all gotten so used to being that uncomfortable. Yes.
Yeah, things come up. Actually, this evening, the fire department reached out, and it was pretty warm in their dorms. So, these things happen, and they happen every day, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you so much
Yeah,
for
you're
all your
welcome.
information. All right, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. Monaco,
Nope.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Balestria,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, Resolution 2022-80 has been adopted. We will now move to ordinances, beginning with ordinance number 2022-24. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2022-24, an ordinance amending the original appropriations ordinance number 2021-36 for the current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Mayfield Heights, State of Ohio, for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2022, as previously amended by ordinance number 2022-11. Specifically, the transfer and supplemental appropriations of funds in various accounts and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Belstraya, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Balstraya.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, second by Mr. Mano. This ordinance would authorize Director of Finance to transfer supplemental appropriations of funds into different accounts. These funds are listed in Section 2, Exhibit A, mostly transferring from the general funds to the various other funds within the city. Mrs. Fagan, is there anything you would like to add to this? No. Okay, summed it all up for you. Are there any questions for Mrs. Fagan? Okay, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balstraya.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Ordinance 2022-24 has been approved. Moving to ordinance 2022-25, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2022-25, an ordinance enacting Chapter 719 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Mayfield Heights, Ohio, regarding donation drop boxes and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Monaco, second by Mrs. Tressi. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balstraya.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mr. Belstraya. The building committee had a meeting where they took a look at these drop boxes throughout the city. All members of council should have received the minutes from the BZA meeting. There were various changes made, and Mr. Monaco went over a few of them in his report. Is there anything else you would like to add?
One thing that I'd like to add is that we need to add something to this document that whoever places these boxes on these commercial properties has the permission from the property owners to do so.
So you're asking to add that part?
Correct.
Well, we can add that, or we can amend
I
it.
think they'd already have permission.
You do?
Mr. Murphy?
Now, Mr. Monaco, are you saying that when, before the drop box is placed there, that they show, I guess, the building department that they have the permission of the property owner?
Before they come in, or at the same time when they come in to apply for a permit, they should have a document stating that they have permission from the property owner to place this box on their property.
Okay.
So
Mr. Thomas.
if that's something that you want to put in ordinance form, that's fine. My process for applicants that live in homeowners associations and things like that, they have to submit a letter saying that it's been approved from the HOA. So I would handle this the same way if an applicant came in for a specific drop box. We would require at that time that they show some type of proof that the property owner is aware and in compliance. I mean, honestly, it would probably have to be the property owner that submits the permit anyways. We typically don't issue non-contractor type permits to anybody but the property owner, so.
Okay, Mrs. Tressi?
So these are drop boxes that, where people will just drive up and, you know, drop in clothing,
So these
things
are
of that
donation
nature?
drop boxes. There's a few of them throughout the city. It hasn't been, to my knowledge, a huge issue, but I've run into situations before in the past where it's become an issue, and it's nice to have those tools to address it in case it is. This gives us contact information for the people directly responsible for the box, as opposed to having to go through property owners. You know, it just gives us a little extra leverage to abate any issue that may happen sooner than later.
And, oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I know that there's been a box in the back of Golden Gate, like behind what was Goodyear. And, I mean, there were bags all around it on the ground because the container was full. So that leads to a lot of issues. Do you go back to the individual who has the permit? Do you continue to give them, let them keep the permit?
So at the committee meeting, we had pictures, we identified several boxes throughout the city, and I think the one that you mentioned was identified at that particular time. Certainly, we issue the permit. That gives us the ability to enforce whatever problems may exist, and if their pickup times are slacking, we can certainly either require that they improve them, or we just consider the box a nuisance and they either collect it or we have the city collect it, which is also listed in here as well. It gives us the ability to
Enforce.
send the service department out there and pick it up.
They left.
He left.
Okay, yeah. So we'll send the service department out there to pick it up. No problem.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Monaco, did you have something?
Question for the law director. Once this ordinance is adopted, can we enforce it on existing boxes, or this kicks out the minute that this is adopted?
Can be enforced on existing boxes.
Can it?
Yeah, this would be prospective in nature and go forward, so that if, whenever this was in effect and it was violated by, one of the box owners, this could be enforced.
Thank you.
In other words, going forward, they'll have to apply and, meet the requirements, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say if, rather than do this amendment, I would say adopt this now, and at the next meeting, we'll bring up an amendment to it to indicate that what you had requested, and then we'll just amend it at that time so we can get it on the books.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Ordinance 2022-25 has been approved. Moving to ordinance number 2022-26, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2022-26, an ordinance amending Chapter 1335 of the codified ordinances of the city titled Permit and Fees by revising the fee schedule contained therein and declaring an emergency. First reading, and as I noted earlier, it should be placed on first reading because there's a little work to be done. However, I would suggest that if you refer to Section 1335.04, which is fees for the architectural review of building plans, and Section 1335.06, fees for certificates of occupancy, and 1341.03, housing license fees. If council does have any problem with those, I will instruct Mr. Thomas to start printing his forms, and then we'll consider this at the next meeting.
Repeat the first number. 13.
1335.04.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Ordinance number 2022-27, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2022-27, an ordinance enacting Section 1342 of the codified ordinances of the city titled Vacant Property, Building Registration, and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mrs. Tressi, second by Mr. Mano. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mano. Second by Mr. Monaco. The purpose of this ordinance is to create a program where we can identify and register vacant residential and commercial buildings. This will also help establish owners' responsibilities of their properties. Mr. Monaco, is there anything you would like to add to this part of the conversation?
The only thing that I like to point out, and it's just a very minor thing, I think the penalty is spelled incorrectly. But other than that, I'm pleased with the way this has been drafted.
Thank you. Are there any questions for
Noted.
Any questions for Mr. Monaco? Okay, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this resolution has been approved. We'll move to motions, beginning with motion A. Mr. Murphy.
Motion A is to authorize the sale of 3 building department vehicles. A 2016 Ford Focus, VIN number 1FADP3F27GL305226, mileage 44,497. 2016 Ford Focus, VIN number 1FADP3F2XGL293153, mileage 17,981, and a 2007 Ford Focus, VIN number 1FAHP34N47W278595, mileage 52,423.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Monaco.
Second.
Second by Mr. Belstrea. These vehicles are currently not being used by the building department, and they are no longer needed. Are there any comments from council or questions? Mrs. Tressi.
I'm sorry, will we be purchasing 3 new vehicles?
I asked the building director that. No,
No,
but you can
building director.
speak. All right.
Yeah, so currently we have 4 vehicles that we use on a daily basis. These vehicles have been sitting in the back parking lot for quite some time. It was requested that I move sooner than later due to the snow's going to start flying and there's some issues with parking in the back parking lot. So these vehicles were brought to my attention and we're just trying to address it while there's still some value there.
Thank you. Any further questions? Mr.
do.
Monaco.
Why are we selling a 2016 Ford Focus with 17,000 miles? This is just, I mean, can we use it in another department somewhere? I mean, we're buying new vehicle and this is just barely broken in, rather.
Yeah, so if there's another department that would like the vehicle, by all means, we can explore that, but I believe the vehicle in particular was heavily smoked in, and it's an issue for other employees to get into at this point, so that's part of the value issue that we're trying to salvage.
Mayor, I have a question. Do we have a smoking policy for our vehicles?
Yes.
For every department or system-wide? Yeah. Mrs. Tressi.
Did we just start the smoking policy, or would we have had that in 2016?
It wasn't vigorously enforced.
Thank you. All right, is there a motion to approve? Motion to
Moved.
approve.
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Belstrea, second by Mrs. Cepeda. Roll call.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this motion has been adopted. All right. I will now make a motion to go into executive session,
To discuss
or to discuss property,
economic development.
economic development. Mrs. Tressi, second by Mr. Mano. Roll call on the motion.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, we will now proceed into executive session. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Savetta, second by Mrs. Tressi. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are now adjourned. Thank you.
Don wants to stay on.
Yeah.